Hi, I'm Janome Educator Katy Mitchell, and today we are going to be using the MyLock 454D Serger, and we're going to be making pajama top. This is part one of a three-part series where we're going to be making the whole pajamas, top, bottom, and a bathrobe to go with it. We're going to be using the 454D Serger, which it's new, it's great, it's smooth, and no matter what skill level you have, you'll really like it. It's very easy to use, especially when threading. The pattern we're going to be using today is Simplicity 9861, which is a really simple pattern, especially for beginners or if you've advanced, great to get through. We're also going to be using the CoverPro 3000 to finish up our pajama top with the hem. Now you don't have to have a CoverPro to do this. I used my regular sewing machine at home when I did my first one, so I'm going to show you multiple ways to get this project done. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's fast, simple, and you're going to love it. We're going to begin with the Janome 454D MyLock Serger. I'm going to walk you through how to set your machine up and give you some tips and tricks along the way. The MyLock 454D Serger has many different stitches and lots of different capabilities and techniques that you can do with it. Today, we're going to be using all 4 threads to use a double needle with the overlocker for a 4-thread stitch. There's also a 3-thread where I would only use 1 needle. I can do a rolled hem, picot, gathering, and with all the extra feet that are available for you, there's lots more you can do with it. Today I'm also going to be using my extra wide table, which gives me a lot of room and keeps my project up, and my little trash catcher right here. Now if you need help threading your machine, which this machine is very easy to thread, we're going to put a link down below for you to follow. Since we're going to be using the 4-thread serger stitch, I've already got my 4 spools of thread up here and my machine threaded properly. Now, when I look at my tension dials here, I have them all set as a 3. This is a great starting point for you when you want to sew. At a 3, I've found that I can sew through shears all the way up to denims and usually not have to adjust it at all. But if I do need to adjust it, I can pull my manual out and see which way to use the dials on the machine for tighter or looser. I also have my stitch length on the side over here as a 3. This is like your stitch length that you would use on a sewing machine. Normally we have it set to like a 2.2, 2.4 when we're piecing, but 3 is the standard for when you do a serge. My differential feed, which is your feed dogs, is set to a 1.0, which is your standard as well. So now before we get started sewing, a couple things we need to do. One is, after we've cut out our pattern, let's read through the instructions. Let's find out what our seam allowance is. Normally when you're sewing garments, they have it as a 5/8 inch. Sometimes it could be quarters, sometimes it could be half, so it's a good idea, yes, to read over your instructions. In this case, it's a 5/8 inch seam allowance that we want to use. When I look at my foot here, I have 2 notches. These line up with my needles that are back in here. I also have some grooves over here and markings to tell me what is a 5/8 inch, a left needle or right needle. But to verify, I'm going to take my gauge and I'm going to put 5/8 inch, and look, it lines up perfectly with my 5/8 inch right here. So when I'm sewing, that is my guide to have the edge of my fabric be here. Being as I have this here now, you see I have a clip and I have a straight pin. What do I use? It depends on the purpose of what I'm doing, but like everyone, I have my certain things that I like to use. I am a straight pin girl. I like to straight pin my fabric in order. When I'm sewing, as I come up towards my blade, I'm going to go ahead and pull my pin out that way and toss it aside. That way it's not going to come in contact with my blade. This helps me with, I won't, 1, break my blade, put a nick in my blade, or actually cut my straight pin in half. Now, let's go into our project. So I have my project all cut out here and ready to get going. First off, I'm going to take my neckband and let's get that serged on the seam. I'm just going to take it right up here, I don't even have to lift my foot up or anything because my feed dogs come out and catch it automatically. But again, I'm lining up with my 5/8 inch right there, and off I go. Listen to how quiet and smooth that is. Now I'm going to take my front and the back, and I'm going to do my shoulder seams. And yes, I do pin at this because I really want things to be lined up nicely. So I've got my shoulder seams pinned the way I need them to be, and you can tell the front and the back. The front is lower than the back. And now I'm going to take them and just sew them at the 5/8 inch seam allowance as well. I go ahead and sew off a little bit before I start my next shoulder. And remember to pull that pin out before you get to your blade. And there's a little cutter on the side of the machine that I use to cut as well as cut in between. So now I've got my seams done. Once my shoulder seams are sewn, I'm going to turn it right side out. I'm not going to worry about my tails like this because they're going to be cut off when I put my neckband on. I'm going to take my neckband and I'm going to mark it and pin it in quadrants. So the back to the front and then the side, so it's all equal. I also put a mark in the center front and the center back as well to line up. I'm going to take it and I'm going to go ahead and start pinning my neckband to the back and the front of my top, lining up my seam with the center back. And I'm just going to go around and pin it. Now that I have it pinned in the 4 different places, I also want to make sure that my seam is pointing towards the back section of your shirt. I'm not going to worry about pinning in between because I'm going to be stretching this as I sew to make everything fit. So now let's take it on over and get going. I'm going to start with the back, and I'm going to lift my foot up and just get that in there going. I'm going to attach it just a little bit and reposition. And then I'm going to edge out to get that 5/8 of an inch seam. And I'm pulling my fabric as I go to make sure the neckband fits snugly with the front and back of the shirt. Again, I'm pulling out pins as I go along. Lining up, stretching. Notice how nice that catcher bin is getting all my scraps. And as I come along to where I started, I want to sew over that to make sure it is the right width. And I just sew off and cut. And now you have your neckband on your shirt, just like that. Now with the little tail that's here, there's several things you can do. One is trim it off, but I will go ahead and take one of the long threads and just pull it and kind of knot it like this, and then I'm just going to trim it off. Because I've sewed over it again with the serger at the beginning, it helps reinforce that. Some people like to use fray check, some people will take a needle and put thread through it and wind it through, but I just pull it to get that little knot and you're ready to go. So now we're going to be putting on the sleeves. Really, it's pretty easy to put a sleeve on when you don't sew the side seam to begin with, and stretch fabric lets you do that. You don't have to insert it. I've already marked my shoulder section here, which is the seam, and now we're going to pin it to it and get going. Also, notice your front and back. You have the small notch for the front and the larger notch, that is your back for lining up. So we're going to put right sides together and pin away. So just like on your neck seam, you are going to have some gaps because you are going to stretch this a little bit as you sew. But everything is pinned in place proportionally, and I'm ready to get going. I like to sew with my sleeve on top of the front and back. It lays nicer for you when you do stitch. Just line her up a little bit and off we go. I'm going to pull my tail out, that way it'll get cut off as I sew. And just like that, my first sleeve is sewn in. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin and repeat for the other side. Again, I'm lining my center notch up, lining up my edge with my small notch for the front. And I kind of like to work side by side, so I make sure that everything is centered and spaced properly, so I don't have any big gaps anywhere. And when I get here, I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to have that little gap because we stretch it as we sew. Adjust that just a wee bit. And now it's all pinned, and I'm ready to start sewing my second sleeve. Now when I sew, I'm actually watching how my fabric goes in there to make sure I don't get any puckers, but I'm also watching to make sure I've lined it up with that 5/8 inch seam. I don't necessarily look at my needles when I'm sewing, I watch this edge. And I tell you, having this extra wide table is really nice. It helps keep your fabric up with you. And just like that, both sleeves are in. Did you realize how easy that was going to be? Look at you go. So now we're going to start with our side seams. I've gone ahead and pinned them in place, lined up my seam right here. I'm not worrying about my tails because those will get cut off as I sew, and I'm ready to sew. Matching up my 5/8 inch seam, and off I go. lot easier on straight seams because you just let it rip. One seam done, one more to go. Second seam is done. Let's turn it inside out. And look at that, your shirt is almost complete. Now we've got cuffs to do and a hem. So now we need to put the cuffs on our sleeves. Doing it is just like doing the neckband, only this is a little more confined area and it's a little fatter cuff, but it works just the same. We're going to go ahead and take it to the serger and let's serge our edges. Now I can go ahead and chain piece this without having any problems. And when I'm done, I'm just going to cut it and separate them. So I've got my cuffs done, and again, just like on the neckband, I need to fold them in half and start getting them ready to be pinned onto the sleeve itself. Okay, so I'm going to pin it, I'm going to mark it. I've got my two center sections, and I'm going to mark for the quarter section, just like on the sleeve. So on your sleeve, again, we've got our seam, and then I folded it in half for that to be pinned to, so it's nice and balanced. It is quite a bit smaller, but I am going to put it over my cuff, just like that, and pin it to the center like this, and then turn it and pin the seams together. Now, it looks really crumpled. That's okay, because what happens is when I sew it, I'm going to go ahead and stretch that cuff like this as I sew, so it's going to work out just fine. Again, I'm just getting it started, and I will take it as at a slant to get to that 5/8 inch mark. Making sure everything is lined up good. And then you sew. Be sure and pull those pins out. So I sewed over my beginning stitches, and again I'm going to go ahead and pull one of those threads to make it tighten into like a little knot, and then trim it away, turn it right side out, and just like that, a cuff is done. Look how easy that was. And we're going to do the same thing to the second sleeve. So look, both cuffs are done. How easy with that. And look how professional it looks. Now we're going to do the hem, which is the last part of the pajama top. And remember, I told you there's two ways to do it. We're going to be doing the Cover Pro with it. But if you don't have a Cover Pro and want to just do it on your regular sewing machine, what I suggest is I like to serge the edge all the way around, but then we're going to go ahead and measure it for the hem amount. And then on my sewing machine, I'll go ahead and sew it down around. Sometimes I'll do 2 bypasses and give it a double look, but we are going to be using the Cover Pro, which we're going to get ready right now. Okay, so we've got ahead and got our Cover Pro 3000 set up to use. I went ahead over here and measured up 1.5 inches, pinned it all the way around, and gave it a little press so it would stay in place for me. Using the Cover Pro is really easy. We're going to take it and put it face down. And because this is big enough, I don't have to pull my little cover off and have a free arm. I don't need to, but you have that capability with this machine. I'm going to go ahead and start on a side seam. Now, I know that this is 1.5 inches, so I measured from the edge of my foot over 1.5 inches and gave myself a little notch so I know where to line it up. Comes off real easy with alcohol, thank goodness. I'm going to go ahead and line this up. I'm going to get it started on the seam, pull my pin out, lower my foot, and here we go. Now, because I know I did good, I hope, on turning this up 1.5 inches all the way around, everything should catch wonderfully. And again, I don't want to sew over any of my straight pins, so I remove them before I get to that point. Now when I get to the end, you just kind of line it up with the previous notches, seams, lift your foot, and pull. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. So when I look at the underside, look how nice that looks. I can trim this away, no problem, but look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Now, what a lot of people have done with these, they go ahead and pull it to the behind so it's not up front anymore, and they can tie it and then cut them off, and we are done. Look at that. You've got a pajama top. So I hope you have enjoyed sewing with me using our Cover Pro and the MyLock 454D Serger. If you want to get more familiar with those and give them a test drive, go see your Janome dealer for that. And I hope you come back for section number 2, where we're going to be doing the pants for this pajama, bottom and top set, and there's going to be a third one for the bathrobe. Happy sewing!